flight simulation community, there's very few accessories and peripherals that truly make me say, wow. Well, what you'll be looking at today definitely did. I'd like to share with you guys my experience with the Crosswinds by MFG. Looking at are 17 ball bearings, 12-bit electronics, magnetic field sensors, Hall effect sensors. They're all contactless and have zero friction. We're looking at a composite material that's masterfully crafted by someone named Milan from MFG Flight Group that has a outstanding record in furniture design and furniture building. Really, you can see his engineering and his construction prowess here in these rudder pedals. The fit and finish, the aesthetic appearance, and really just the experience overall are second to none, and I think really set the standard for what we deserve in peripherals for the flight simulation community. These have been well regarded by a lot of flight simulation combat pilots, from ARMA to Rise of Flight to DCS, but we're going to look at it from an FS standpoint today. So first, let's look at how they're put together. When you first get the package, it ships internationally, so it's extremely well built and robust. Now you'll start with what you see on this desk. So first thing we'll do is we'll connect the two wires from the rotating part of the rudder system to the stationary base. One to the left and one to the right. Make sure the wires don't overcross each other and you're good to go. Next, you take the main tension spring and you connect it to the spring tension arm that sits on the opposite facing side of the base. Simply take the open end and loop it on over. Once that's done, you then take the spring tension screw piece and you attach it through the hole that's on the end of it through the other open end of the main spring. What you do from there is then thread it through the hole on the side of the base that's facing you. And then you take the spring tension adjusting cam and you just simply screw it on. Once that nut is on, you take this little end cap protector and you just throw it on the end there, just so that you don't stub your toe on it. Alright, next up we'll take a look at the adjustment plates for the toe brakes. Now these are optional, and you can actually take the toe brakes and attach them directly to the toe brake assembly, but I use these because they give you an additional layer of customization, both in terms of width outside and inside. So to attach these, you simply take the supplied screws and you put them through and then screw them onto the toe brake plates. Now the toe brakes can also have the toe angle adjusted, but I like them directly vertically, so that's how we'll attach them today. I'm taking the same adjustment plate and putting it on the other side now. Now I am using a power tool, but it's important to note that because of this composite material, it really does not require a lot of torque to have the screws well secured. These adjustment plates specifically have little indents that are built into them that allow for great positive retention without a lot of force. So now we're going to put on our first toe brake. So there are holes on the toe brake as well as on the adjustment plates that allow you to put them in the position that's most comfortable for you. I put them pretty much dead in the center, and specifically because I like the width of my toe brakes being a little bit more narrow, I went ahead and actually mounted the outside holes on the toe brakes to the holes on the adjustment plate. Of course, you can do them the opposite way and get an even wider toe brake effect. They'll never be quite as narrow as a Cessna, for example, but they feel about right for the width of Boeing rudders. So you simply put through those supplied screws, and now you can see the toe angle adjustment there. I'm going to keep mine straight up. Then you take the nut that is supplied, put it on the back, and you screw it on. There's just 2 screws here that you have to screw on. And the cool thing is that Milan has said that he's made this so easy to take on and off because in the future he does have plans for making different style toe brakes. So you may get some that look like Cessnas, you may get some that look like Airbus or like Boeing. But for right now, they're very, very big, broad, and comfortable ergonomic toe brakes that are something more like what you'd see in a fighter plane. So I'm just throwing the screws and the appropriate nuts on the opposite toe brake and securing it on down. So right now, the rudder pedals are actually pretty much completely assembled, but we are going to be installing an additional optional part. Nice and secure. So the optional part that we'll be assembling now is actually the wall spacers. The wall spacers are great for those of you who put your rudder pedals directly up against the wall, and they're really a simple yet ingenious design. The reason why these are so important is because a lot of the rudder pedals that are out there do not play kindly with a wall behind them, because when they're pushed up against that wall, the toe brakes will sometimes hit the wall when you're yawing left and right. These provide about an extra 3 inches or so of space between the wall and your toe brakes so that you have a full range of motion in a comfortable way. One of my biggest gripes with the CH pedals, for example, as well as actually the GoFlight pedals, is that the USB actually bumped up against the wall and you couldn't get it flush. Now, let's look at some of the other adjustments that you can make specifically to the angles of the toe brakes. So the first thing that you'll notice is that there are actually indicators on the left and right toe brake underneath them that show you the degree of angle that the toe brakes are currently sitting on. They can be anywhere from 20 degrees to a full 60 degrees, which are nearly vertical and very uncomfortable. You want to take some time to figure out what feels most comfortable for you, because of course if they're too high, then you can have some unintended inputs, and if they're too low, you have to extend your calf a little bit further than is comfortable, and you can either develop a cramp or you won't be able to get full deflection. So to adjust these, it's relatively simple. There are 2 screws that sit inside of the pathway that's on the inside of the rotating piece of the rudder assembly, and you want to make sure that you loosen these up sufficiently so that you can freely move the toe brake. They do not have to come all the way out, as when they're loose enough, they will travel their full degrees of motion with relatively little effort. So now that you can see they're moving, what I'll do is I'll figure out what's the most comfortable position for me. Now you can eyeball it, or you can actually put it down and adjust it while putting your feet on them. And I typically find that around 35 degrees or so is the right level of pitch for me. So I'm looking at the other side just to verify that I have them both at the same indicators. And they are. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and tighten them down. So typically what you want to do is you want to start with the screw that is facing you or closest to you, because otherwise if you start with the other one, sometimes it'll torque the toe brake up and it'll come out of its alignment. So I'm just verifying that both sides are now aligned, and they are. So that's how you can adjust the angle of your toe brakes. Next up, let's take a look at how it is that you can adjust the tension of the mainspring and the actual yaw of the rudder. Now there's really 2 ways of doing this. You can either adjust the spring as well as the spring arm, or you can even replace it with the cams that are provided. And we'll talk about the cams in just a moment, but as you can see here, I'm basically just switching the spring on the inner side of the adjustment arm, and it gives me the desired effect. Now let's take a look at those actual cams. Now basically what the cams are is that they're different profiles that the main bearing that controls the yaw of the rudder pedals sit on. As you can see with this particular cam, it has a very clear center point along with 2 arches that go up to the left and right, so that as you deflect left and right, you have a little bit more of a tactile feel. Now the camera I'm showing in the back, you can see actually arches up a little bit higher, which means that the further you deflect, the harder it will be to fully deflect. What that means is that you will get a real world feeling, which is a feeling of not just a consistent smooth motion, but rather you can remember how far and how hard you have to deflect. So once that's done, let's go ahead and hook it up to our computer. As you can see on the back, there's a single USB Type B connector. You simply take the supplied cable, or you can use any old generic USB Type B connector, and you simply plug it into the back. Because you have the wall spacers on there, you don't have to worry about that USB hitting the wall behind your desk. So we go ahead and just take it and plug it onto the back. Of course, naturally, you would take the opposite end of the USB connector and you'd plug it into your actual computer. Alright, so now that we've got our rudder pedals actually plugged in, let's go ahead and update the firmware as well as calibrate the pedals using the MFG software package. So first of all, to get the MFG software package, you'll go on over to the MFG website, click on downloads, and then you'll download the latest MFG package according to which version of the rudder pedals that you have. Of course, for the latest rudder pedals, you'll want to download the latest package. We'll go ahead and click download, and once we do that, we'll get a little folder that looks just like this, MFG software package. And for this one, it's version 2.0 as we just saw. Alright, let's go ahead and open it on up, and you'll see three things in here. You'll see four things really. Your firmware upgrade, a net framework installer, DI view, and the MFG configurator. Let's start by updating the firmware, and to do that, we'll open up the MFG configurator, as well as we'll also open up the firmware upgrade folder and select the micro bootloader. So this is a very simple process. All you have to do to update your firmware, I should say, is to first launch your rudder pedals into the bootloader mode by clicking this button, and then you'll click connect. Now I do want to say one thing before I actually start it, is that there is a little trick because the bootloader only stays active for a couple of seconds. So once you click on bootloader, you want to continue to select this connect to MCU button until you actually see your rudder pedals connect. So let's go ahead and click on bootloader, and then we'll continue to press this button. And there we go. We see that our rudder pedals are now connected. So since they're now connected, we'll start by browsing for the hex. And for my rudder pedals, it's version 502. And then we'll just select begin uploading. It only takes about a second, and then you'll hear your rudder pedals reconnect to Windows. Great, so our rudder pedals have now reconnected to Windows, and we're completely done with updating the firmware. It's as simple as that. So now, let's go ahead and actually calibrate our rudder pedals. Now to do that, I'm also going to open up the DI view. Now the DI view you don't really need, but it's just a helpful tool to allow you to see the inputs that you're giving your rudder pedals. You can see I have three axes, Y, X, and Z. Y and X are for the toe brakes, and Z is for the actual rudder itself. So let's go ahead and start by calibrating them. To calibrate each individual axis, what you'll need to do is go up to the particular axis you'd like to use, make sure that the calibration on-off selector is ticked, and especially for the rudder itself, or your Z-axis, make sure that you have a center on it, because of course your rudder has an actual center. Once you select the one that you'd like to actually configure, let's start with the left toe brake, you just simply select axis calibration. Now, what I'll go ahead and do is give my toe brake full deflection forward, and release, and then I'll give it another full press, and release, and then just one last time for good measure, and release. Great, now all I have to do is hit stop, and my left toe brake is fully configured. Let's do the same thing for the right one, full down, release, full down, release, and then one last time, full down, release. Great, and now let's go ahead and do the actual rudder itself. So full right, center it out, full left, center it out, full right, full left, and center it out. Great. So now our rudder pedals are 100% configured. Now you can do some customization here. For example, when I put my feet on my actual rudder, you can see that I'm actually getting some movement on the Z-axis, even though I'm barely even moving my feet. Now that's a little bit too sensitive for me. So if I wanted to create a greater dead zone in the middle to avoid any sort of input when my feet are just kind of idly resting on my rudder pedals, I can select the dead zone center number, and I can increase this to the value that I'd like. I can go all the way up to 80. For me personally, I find that around 50 is the right number for me, but you can play with this and make sure it's to your liking. I just simply hit apply, and now when I put my feet on the rudder pedals, you can see there's absolutely no movement. But if I give it a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, you can see I'm actually getting some input there. So you can adjust that to your liking to make it as sensitive or not sensitive as you'd like, along with configuring the actual spring to give you the desired result. You can do the same thing for the dead zone starts of your toe brakes as well, but by default, I think the toe brakes are pretty doggone good. So great, now that we've got everything calibrated, we'll just open up our game. All you have to do is then select your rudder pedals as an input device, and you're ready to fly. So, let's go ahead and give them a test. Alright, so here we are flying now. We're over here at Meigs Field in Chicago, and we have some very, very intense winds. They're going anywhere from 18 knots to around, they can bounce up to around 20 knots or so, and they are at a crosswind. Now I'm not using my regular yoke. Instead I'm just using a regular old Xbox 360 controller, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I really want to highlight how much control you have with these rudder pedals. If you guys have watched my other videos, you know I'm pretty good at landing even in very tough situations, and this is going to be a real challenge as I don't have the full control of my yoke to help me power through and make those fine adjustments. So really 90% of this is done all with my rudder pedals. First you see this turn into the very intense winds, and I'm having a pretty easy time coordinating through the turn. Those really sensitive Hall effect sensors, magnetic sensors, make things a whole lot easier to get very fine adjustments. And even as you look down at the rudders here in this particular aircraft, you can see that they're responding very well with the high degree of fidelity that these Hall effect sensors give. So now I'm turning into the crosswind, and I'm just going ahead and pointing my nose directly out and kind of crabbing my way on in. And once I'm established on the glide slope, I'm making just very fine adjustments with my rudders to keep myself aligned. Of course you can see some fine adjustments happening with a little joystick on my Xbox 360 controller, but really a lot of the work here is going to the rudder pedals. So really all I'm doing is worrying about my vertical control with my Xbox 360 controller, as you can see, and the rest of the control is all my rudders. You can see I'm able to get myself onto the runway safely here, make some fine adjustments just there at the end, and I'm just controlling vertically with the controller, and you can see how easy and smooth of a landing that was. Of course if I had my yoke I'd be closer to the center line, but I was able to track a consistent point the entire way down. Now I'm applying the toe brake to slow us down. Overall, these are the greatest accessories I have for my flight simulation experience, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you next time.